Alright, welcome to tonight's episode on the FPP. Tonight we're actually going to try doing a movie review. Ghost in the Shell. Recently there was like a live action.
1995.
Yeah, so recently there was a live action that was done on this particular movie anime thing. So instead of watching that, we decided to go watch the original Ghost in the Shell before perhaps we go look at the live action and see what it's all about. So we sort of just sat down just before and watched the 1995 Ghost in the Shell movie.
Yep.
And we're going to give you our first impressions on it.
And so I have seen the 2017 one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep, so I'm watching 2017 and then going back to the 1995. Well, you two are just starting from scratch.
Straight out of nothing,
Yeah.
no context at all.
Yep. First impressions of the movie.
Well, I found it to be very, very slow paced. It definitely took quite a while for things to really happen. I mean, it started off with a bit of an assassination sort of sequence to open the movie, to sort of establish that this character is like some kind of super robot assassin. But yeah, after that, it really goes into a lot of expository dialogue and conversations and things like that. It takes a long time for anything to really build up. And I felt like at that point, they haven't really given us much to care about at this stage. And it was really hard for me to connect with any of our characters. This movie definitely did not feel like a character-focused movie. It was more about the world and what's going on in it. But at the same time, I didn't really understand the world or what was going on in it. It didn't really teach me as we were going through the story.
I feel like the film is kind of started off with an idea of trying to explore certain themes, and then everything was kind of built around it. So there's tons of just talking about ideas and like the philosophies.
There was a lot of talking about like what constitutes as a life form and the intelligence of an AI and things like that, which are all interesting ideas. But I feel like we only got very little pieces and fractions of what they could have explored in just a few short scenes when two characters were just talking to each other. Like the protagonist, it felt like it wasn't until like 25 minutes or half an hour into the story that she actually started saying anything personal about how she felt about her current situation, being like this full-on cyborg and not even sure if she's real or whatever. But at that point, it's like we're so far into the movie that it's really hard to care about these characters because we just don't know anything about them on a personal level.
Yeah, I found that overall the movie was pretty boring, to be honest.
Yeah.
You don't particularly care for the characters. No one really stands out to me as particularly like an interesting character you can relate to, I think. Maybe that the guy who's
big dude with the white hair had a bit of a humorous
I think the
sort of
person
quip here and there.
The person you're supposed to relate to is that guy. What's his name? Togusa?
Jeez, you actually remember his name?
I wrote down.
You wrote down
Togusa. He's the guy who uses old-fashioned gun and
the revolver, right?
and who's not modified much.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, the cop.
The cop guy.
And he was really in it at all.
Yeah.
It was really hard to relate to that character if we're supposed to, because he wasn't really in it much.
Yeah.
Well, obviously I thought it was beautiful. I was sort of watching it more for the animation than anything else. I will agree.
The visuals were very impressive.
Yeah, the story, I wasn't really concentrating, probably because it didn't hook me, so I was just watching the visuals. It's probably one of the most detailedly animated films I have ever seen.
Yeah.
I have to say, especially because it was made in the 90s as well, everything would have been hand drawn, and I just
all the
as
landscapes.
an animator and a fan of animations, I'm really I can feel that. It's I really appreciate that.
Yeah, there was a lot of time spent in watching the visuals and the landscapes and the transitional scenes. As much as I feel like they went for a while, I feel like that was pretty big core to what Ghost in the Shell was, with these really elaborate sceneries and whatever's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, they took an opportunity in the beginning, in the opening, to sort of show you how the protagonist was sort of built or created or maintained or something.
Yes.
So it's showing you each step by step as she's getting built and stuff while they're doing the opening credits.
There is a lot of emphasis on atmosphere and environment building.
Yeah.
Like, all the people running around in the rain and stuff.
Yeah, that mob animation. But yeah, I think the world and the detail that went into that world building definitely like told a story of its own, I guess. And like if it was just that and like a set of images with no like story whatsoever, I still like would have found some kind of like I would have taken some other kind of story from it of like that world and what it is.
I feel like if I had watched it from the time it released, I would have been pretty impressed by it. I think in today's world, we take things like visuals for granted, so it felt like those transitional scenes went for far too long and they're just not as dazzling as they probably used to be.
I think that is a thing though, like you look at old films and they'll spend 10 minutes just setting up the opening.
Yeah.
Whereas today we want everything like quick, like out of the way.
In terms of story, I feel like the atmosphere and the world and the city that we're looking at has already been established, and more minutes of more scenery doesn't really build more on it. I feel like we're just getting more of what we've already established here. So in terms of a story structure, I feel like it was there just to run out the clock. At least that's how I felt when I was watching it.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think just like spatters of just like atmosphere, like environmental atmosphere, kind of scenery, kind of almost adds to what the whole movie is trying to go for.
Yeah, I think it was like definitely very intentional from the beginning.
Yeah,
I think that was what.
Yeah, if they took all that out, I think you wouldn't have the same kind of air to it,
Yeah, I think that's mainly because there wasn't really that much else to the story itself. I mean, no doubt it's really hard to animate all the action sequences and everything like that, but it seems like a story like this would contain a lot of action. You're sort of in a postmodern sort of future with a lot of cybernetic enhancements, and that's a pretty difficult story to draw when it's so demanding on detailed. I mean,
but not to worry, the 2017 one has more action.
More action,
of course, right?
I'm not saying good. Like more action makes the movie better, but I felt like this movie was heavily surrounded by its action, or would heavily depend on it, just because of the technology that they use in combat and everything else. Which seems kind of odd because they use like thermo optics to use camouflage, but they're also using traditional guns at the same time. As in, it feels like there's a bit of a mix in how technology functions.
They're like high tech guns, right? Except for that one guy who uses.
It's like she's got an entire cybernetic body and everything else, but she's using like a P90, and these guys are using like micro Uzis and stuff. It feels like they're using very old technology mixed with very new technology. They're supposed to be like top of the line military, like defense and whatever. Whereas that's the feeling I got. It didn't really explain it to me very well as to what she was or what she did. I feel like the camouflage was a bit comical. As in the opening scene, she comes from the rooftop and shoots the guy, and then uses her camouflage. It's just like, doesn't that kind of defeat the point of camouflage? You've already been spotted.
Well, actually, that's a pretty good point, I guess.
But I mean, like, even when the dude was wearing his cloak camouflage and running away, as in, like, he's hiding in the marketplace, the dude can't track him, and he's just running over there pushing people over, and it's just like, dude, you've got fucking camouflage, fucking use it, son. I felt like it's like the worst hiding, like, you could ever use with something so powerful with this kind of camouflage technology.
I do like how, like, the opening scene where she's out the window and she kind of has her face still visible, and she puts her hand over her face and just disappears as well.
It's very impressive
cool
effect, especially for something done back then.
Yeah.
I think I'm just being like nitpicky on the use of the
that's
technology.
Fair enough. Like that, yeah, but it's not.
It's like I feel like I see all this impressive technology, camouflage, and cybernetic bodies, and I see them using like guns, and it's just.
I think that's one of the themes of the movie, right? It's just the whole.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got. Like that was the whole thing of the movie. Was like it was really like derelict and like
post-apocalyptic, almost.
Super like.
So that's what
dystopian, but then inside everywhere was super like high tech and clean.
Yeah.
It's like that.
That's
contrast.
like what a lot of the environmental shots kind of add to the movie. Like the whole high tech aspect of things, but you see all the slums and stuff, or like the crappy buildings and like.
But you
old
think
times.
the chick who's all high tech and stuff would have the most high tech equipment, which she kind of does, but she's still using like old tech guns. She goes into the scene with like her guns and stuff, and eventually just has to like strip down and use her camouflage in order to actually get anything done anyway. It seems like, why didn't you do that to begin with? If you had this such a tactical advantage of stealth, as in why didn't you use it? You're going in like guns blazing and you haven't got any other kind of technology to use. go up against this giant camouflage tank thing and you're just shooting at it with your gun. Well, gee whiz, that's very effective.
I actually
Well, it
did.
got rid of the camouflage though, and it could sense her. Like when it looked back,
I honestly...
and it saw through her camouflage once
Yeah.
it knew where she was.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how shooting the glass on the roof was able to break the camouflage effect.
Like I think it's just stuff falling onto the.
If it like touches things, it like gives itself away because it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of permanently disabled its camouflage.
But what I didn't understand was what was up with the spider tank in the first place.
Yeah, it was very odd and out of place. It felt like it was like a video game scene. It was
like the final
this
boss.
Big kind of big kind of arena that you're fighting a boss on. Was it intended to be that way? I'm not sure.
Probably.
But yeah, it's just sort of covering the escape vehicle of this thing, and they had no other plan in place but to have a giant tank protect it from followers.
That was kind of weird to me.
was kinda weird.
Also, why did those people in the helicopters shoot both of them?
Yeah, it never really
Like, who are
explained.
they?
What's
happening?
Yeah, it didn't really explain it. They said they were very similar, but they didn't really explain.
Because
why.
they knew exactly who they were.
Yeah.
Like Target 1, Target 2. They're like, we know who these people are. We're going to kill them both.
It's like we want to take out this target,
Yeah.
except we want to take out this target as well. And the audience is sitting there thinking, well, why are you doing this? As in, is there something more to this character?
Did we
But-
miss something?
Exactly. It feels like we're going into this movie just blind. It feels like we should definitely know more about what's going on. Like throughout the movie, they're using the word ghost or ghost line or having their ghosts hacked, and it's like you're not sure what this means. I think further into the movie, maybe about 45 minutes in, they do mention
explain it, yeah.
they do say in the same sentence like soul and ghost.
Yeah.
But it's like you came across a dude early in the movie who said it was sad to see someone without their ghost, and it's like, well, what does that mean exactly? Yeah, how does someone not have their soul? So it was very, very confusing. I feel like either things purposely weren't established to be intentionally confusing, or we literally left in the dark and just have to figure it out.
From what I gather, it's basically the Major is basically completely cybernetic, except for her ghost, which is like a soul put into a cybernetic body.
Right, so just her conscience, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the whole talk of the shell, which is just
The body.
the
And
body.
she is the ghost in
And
the
the
show.
ghost is just like the mind and the soul.
But is the ghost literally just an interchangeable word with soul? Is that literally all it
Pretty
means?
much,
It doesn't
I
mean
think.
anything more than
No,
that.
I think she said something about like, can she create a soul because of her ghost or something like that. I don't know. I feel like they were separate things. I think her ghost is like her humanity,
Maybe.
I guess, like your consciousness and your like awareness as a thinking, feeling individual.
Because they got scared when like that they found that there was a ghost inside that body.
Yeah, inside the body of that.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, can
Can it
create
create
its own soul or
And
something?
supposedly
Yeah.
it did. It was the AI of this bugged era that was able to create this master of puppets. Again, the story is very vague and it's very hard to follow, and I don't know if it's intentionally done so or there is something you're supposed to know before going into this.
Because the whole project 2501 was all a bit vague, and who is this? What's happening? What's this AI?
I'm constantly questioning what's happening in the
I have
story.
to say, like, when we watched the 2017, it explains it a lot better. As in, it makes a lot more sense. I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but as in, it's much more clearer the way they do it. But I really like the way they did the music.
Yeah,
like,
same.
The soundtrack, as in the way they did like really sharp, kind of accented, like the drums and the bells and like the weird singing.
Yeah.
I feel like we'd understand more what's going on if we understood the lyrics to the singing as well. It might give a bit of context to the atmosphere, maybe. No,
Singing.
I think it was.
I think it was just like chanting.
Yeah.
Like the point was the kind of atmosphere that it gives off.
Yeah, like just the sharpness of everything. Everything's very smooth but sudden.
I got a very jarring sort of sensation from the music. I thought it was very out of place.
I think that's kind of the vibe.
That's intentional.
the point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, but I like that. It was the music soundtrack was very good, I think. It's probably one of the highlights of the movie. For me at least. But yeah, what's next? Barto. He was the guy with the eyeballs, the weird and the white hair.
And the white hair.
He was pretty cool.
I found him to be the most interesting character because he seemed to have the most personality, the most humanity. As in, like, for someone who's all scientific hands, he actually would make a quip here and there, something sarcastic or something like that. and he was the guy who probably had the most screen time next to our main protagonist.
Yeah.
But we still didn't really learn much about him either. He just seemed very much like a human with cybernetic enhancements, and he's just her friend.
Yeah, I like how they kind of touched on the Major's views and Bato's views on being human, right? Because obviously Bato sees Major as human, right?
Yeah.
Like the cybernetic he doesn't see that, and especially when she's nude and stuff, he'll look away.
Yeah.
And then when she's all shot up and stuff, and they place two bodies next to each other, he covers her with the jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like he sees the Major as like a human being, while the Major is questioning whether or not she's real. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big concept and the theme around this movie is what really, defines as a life form and yeah. But it was still very abstract at the same time. It didn't really give you any defining perspective on what that was. It was sort of just people questioning it. And I wasn't too sure what the point of the sequences were, as in like the one where she's just sort of diving. I didn't really quite understand what the point of that sequence was.
Which scene?
It was when she's like just like in the ocean and then sort of just rising out of the ocean. As in, obviously, it's supposed to mean something, but
I think that
as much as I hate it when anime and other things really spell things out for you and really like shove it in your face. At this point, I'm feeling like the messages are so subtle that I can't follow it. I can't connect and I can't keep up.
I think that scene was meant to be basically she wants to feel more human, right? So she does the pointless thing of diving, right? And that feeling she gets when she rises out of the water, so that she doesn't kind of want to be herself, so she kind of does that whole diving thing just to kind of get out of her own body.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, it's definitely down to interpretation. I mean, like I said, it's that vague that you can take it any way you want, I guess. But yeah, I found it to be quite problematic because it was really hard to follow the story. They didn't really establish, like, I didn't even know who Section 6 was compared to Section 9. Who the fuck are these people? Just
those two sections. Oh, whoops.
So is there like two divisions of like the police force that manage this shit? It seems like Section 6 was up to no good and Section 9 were like kind of the good guys. Or at least it sort of gave me that impression. But at the same time, I still wasn't sure what it was that they specifically did or knew anything about them. It was really hard to keep up with everything that was going on. There was a lot of, like, not necessarily political, but there was just a lot of this exchanging and dialogue in which some scenes you got to see some other visuals happening while they were talking, and other times it was just completely wasted. I don't know, I didn't zone out. I focused through the whole thing and paid attention to every word. I still couldn't really keep up. I don't know.
I think another major theme of it was, which kind of relates back to the whole diving thing, is that with all the technology and all the upgrades that people are getting, especially Major, that they have so much access to information that while it kind of opens the door to, being able to explore more things, it kind of restricts people in a way, right?
The limitations or the costs that come with those things.
Or like the realization that they're incredibly restricted, even with all the upgrades, right?
They're not necessarily free to do as they please. They are still bound by their government and everything else. They're not free people. They're just soldiers.
Like Major feels like she's just like a cog.
Yeah, she's just a weapon. Machine.
Yeah. So I think the diving scene, she does that, and the feeling she gets when she rises out of the water, like she passes off as just the impression. Yeah, she wants to get away from all that.
Get that sort of freedom.
Yeah.
I feel like this story would be so much better if there was a large more character focus on our protagonist, and it really sets her up. Because there are some deep psychological themes going on for this character, but we just never really get to know her as a person. And I feel like that's one of the major issues of this story. I feel like if we cared more about this character, we'd be able to follow the story more if we saw it through her eyes. But we sort of had this sort of very zoomed out, very far away perspective as a spectator, just like watching all this shit happen from like all over the place. And we got to somehow keep up with it. And I don't know, I feel like if it was a character focus, it would be so much better, this story.
Maybe. But yeah, I think one of the things with Major is, like, the whole point of her character is that she's kind of indifferent and kind of doesn't have much character. Is almost like the point of her character.
I know, but I feel like that works against it because this could be deeply psychological. But that's the point, is in, like, when your characters are so empty and void of emotions and feelings, how can you expect your audience to connect with that? Especially when you don't focus on those characters either. I mean, it's focused more on the events that happen in the world. And while the world is pretty impressive and dazzling for, you know, a postmodern kind of technological sort of advanced place, it just sort of really lacks in terms of its characters. I don't know. I didn't feel the characters were bland. We just didn't really get to know them at all.
Yeah, I have to say though, I think, like, I've seen a bunch of old, like, anime films from, like, around this same time, and they all kind of are the same in the whole, like, they're very much about the visuals and the building the world through imagery, and often there is no, like, structured plot. There is no point to it. There's no, like, character development. It's just, you're literally there, you're getting, like, a piece of time and a beautiful animated piece. So, I don't know, this felt very familiar in that sense. I think it's almost like a genre in itself, is these, like, types of Japanese animated films.
It's just a different kind of experience.
It feels like more of an art piece than like a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being walked through an art gallery of certain things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think another weird thing they do is, why do they switch bodies at the end? Like,
if they're merging anyway. As in
Project 201 is speaking out of Major's body while she's looking out from his body.
Yeah.
Maybe this is like a symbolic thing there. I don't know.
I didn't really get it either.
She said she was, like, diving, and I thought she was going to...
Yeah, she was going to go into his sort of memories or something and converse with it inside him, thing.
Yeah.
But no, it just seemed like he took control of her body while she sort of took control of his, sort of. And they sort of had a half conversation. Because, like, the other guy there with the white hair could only hear half the conversation because the actual guy in her body was speaking out loud and she was speaking through the mind.
Yeah. I thought it was a bit weird because I thought the reason why she couldn't speak out loud was because her android body stopped working, right? Like, the mouth.
And then she turned her head.
But then how does that guy speak out of her body when she can't speak out of... Okay, anyway.
Yeah, it was definitely a confusing moment. And
maybe that in itself is another...
I think at that point you're giving it too much credit.
I don't know. It could be.
What was the 2017 adaptation like? Was it anything like that?
No. Well, the scene exists as well, but
yeah.
The conversations in the 2017 one are a lot more obvious. Okay. And not as kind of
more clear cut and concise.
Yeah. Like it's much easier to understand in what's going on. Yeah.
I think I'll definitely have to watch the live action. Maybe we can do a review of that one as well.
So we can compare it.
We did have a quick look to see that there are other anime, manga, and even games possibly as well for this franchise. It's possible you do need to know more about the lore of this world before you can really watch it. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if that came before or after this movie.
Yeah, I think there might be either manga or light novels that existed before the movie, but in terms of stuff made by these animators, the movie was the first. So anything made by them followed the movie. But this, again, is, like, a thing that occurs a lot in Japan, where, like, every intellectual property gets expanded on, and you're just kind of, like, expected to have seen all the bits and understand it.
Yeah, I think, like, I still have to judge it as a standalone movie, even if it does have some kind of cultural difference in the way it's presented, and then expects you to go and find that information elsewhere. I still think it was just too slow-paced, with just not enough really going on to keep the viewer engaged.
Yeah, it is pretty boring. So.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Visually stunning, but there wasn't much more to it than that, unfortunately.
It felt like a 3-hour movie when it was an hour and a half. But
yeah, so then by the time we got to the end, I thought this was literally just the next arc in the story and we're about to see what happens next, but that was actually it. It didn't even really feel like a conclusion. Sure. I wasn't even sure what the hell was actually going on there at the end.
But I did like that scene with the garbage man. where he had like implanted memories,
Oh,
and he didn't know what was real,
Yeah.
That was interesting.
and he was like crying, and he's looking at his photo of himself.
Yes. That was definitely an important part, because it's sort of like establishing this world and what can be done in it. Not only is it talking about cybernetic enhancements when you see the dialogue between our two main characters on the boat and how they describe themselves, but even that scene as well establishes the kind of things that can be done to you or to other people in this world. You see them like use their cards and shit to like hack into things and whatever. But yeah, at the same time, being able to replace people's memories and take them away as well is actually quite heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like the ending either. Like the way they do fuse, right? Is that what they went for?
I think they basically fuse, but
like, from what I understood from the ending, they fused. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same impression I got as well.
Yeah,
it's just the head that sort of survives, and now it's on like a new body.
Yeah, I think
it's a very weird introduction to that scene as well. It felt like it was about a horror fucking movie.
I almost thought they were going to go with it was all a dream.
It was all a dream.
Oh my god.
That's like the solution to any bizarre sort of thing. Though it's an easy way out.
But I guess like the whole young body thing was like a reborn Major.
I guess, yeah. But then that's what I felt like. It wasn't really the end yet. I don't know. It felt like it was sort of a new beginning. It was in the next chapter. But that was sort of where it stopped.
It almost makes it seem like we kind of lost Major at the end.
Yeah.
It was like no longer Major.
Yeah, she said that she wasn't really Major and she wasn't the puppet master either. And during their conversation, they said they wouldn't be able to recognize themselves anymore.
Yeah.
They'd be something completely different.
That was an odd ending.
So it's like a fusion of an AI and a human conscience. So now you don't even know what the fuck it is. It's an abomination, really.
What do you think of the ending?
I was confused. I didn't even realise that they'd ended up fusing. I remember them talking about it, and then I was like, oh, okay.
So they all got shot, but it's like you don't know if they'd survived or not.
Yeah, I just assumed that it was still. What do you call her Major? Her name's Motoko.
Motoko.
Yeah.
Motoko Kusanagi.
Yeah.
Good stuff, sir.
Memories.
Keep up with the names. Just keep up with the visuals.
Yeah, I just assumed it was still her. I zoned out in the end.
It seemed like the conversation that she was having with him at the end, like it was her, but it wasn't until she was walking out the door that she basically said that she wasn't really either or anymore.
Yeah. And honestly, that weird evil smile at the end. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
What's happening?
I was creeped out by the introduction to that final scene. It was just like in the distance, like this little girl in a chair, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, we're about to go down a horror vibe, and I was getting scared. But yeah, it was a very weird introduction to that final scene as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, what would you rate the movie out of 10?
I don't know. It feels like if there really is some kind of cultural difference in the way that these movies are shown and the information you have to gather before or afterwards, it's hard to really judge it as a standalone film. I mean, based on its story and plot and everything else, I'd have to rate it pretty low, but at the same time, as we've said, it's not really like a story, it's more of an art exhibit.
Yeah, but I mean, like, given the 2017 plot, right, it gives me the impression that the movie is supposed to be watched by itself.
It is, okay.
I think so. I could be wrong, but...
no, I feel like it probably...
Yeah. But yeah, it's a very Japanese thing to do as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was the movie, and that's it. There's no other context needed. Yeah.
If that was the case, I'd have to rate it pretty low. I mean, I can rate it some good points for its visuals and stuff, but unfortunately there's just not a lot going for it. I couldn't really connect to any of the characters because we didn't really learn anything about them on a personal level. Even then they didn't really elaborate too much on that. The actual world itself and the characters in it doing things like the plot was extremely confusing and I couldn't keep up. It wasn't really very well explained. And when you have a pretty complicated story, you have to ease your audience into it. And there are different techniques that you can do to help them understand what's going on. That's usually why anime is done in like series, and sometimes they can go for a long time because it takes a while to establish something so complex. You can't throw someone into episode 200 and expect them to know what's going on because there's so much going on by that stage. And it's the same thing. It felt like if this was an anime and it took a lot more longer for us to get invested in our character and stuff, we would actually be able to keep up with what the fuck's going on. Unfortunately, as a standalone film, I can't rate it very high. I'm literally like 3 or 4 out of 10 at the here. Like,
that's pretty low.
It is pretty
very
low
low
because literally graphics is the only really points that I can give it.
Okay. Well, I think I'll give it probably a 6.8
6.8
out of 10.
That's a pretty detailed, like.
Okay. Yeah. Overall.
Your
right.
like ranking system.
Overall, yeah. I think I get why some people would really like it. I see how there could be some appeal to the movie and how it can be like a cult classic, because it is like a cult classic. But yeah, the way they just represented the environment, like the whole, everything is sort of high tech, but there's still poor people, and the new technology almost seems old.
Yeah.
Like it's almost feels like it's stagnated. Yeah, that feeling was very good. Yeah, the environment, the way they did all the colours, the environments, like the red, green, blue kind of signs contrasted onto like the really grey cement block kind of environment was pretty awesome, I think.
I feel like they managed to build a pretty decent world. They've got the foundation and potential for everything they need to pull a great story out of it. I just feel like it needs more time to present it to you. And I think there could be something really fantastic there. But
yeah, I think that the characters themselves seem pretty weak. No one's particularly compelling. No one's really too memorable. Yeah, so I mean, characters-wise, it's pretty weak. Plot-wise, it's. I guess there was a point to it, but it was a little bit convoluted, a little too difficult to understand for no reason. And while it does make some interesting, like philosophical points, yeah, the way they presented it was a bit off-putting to me. Yeah. That's my.
I think a 6.8 is pretty generous for that kind of elaboration.
Yeah, I mean, based on just the environments and all the background stuff, which is probably like a good 9 or 9.5. But the rest of it, the characters, the actual story, and it as a movie in itself is like a 4. Yeah.
So you sort of average around 6.8.
Sure.
Do the math here. Let me carry the 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mine is very similar to yours. I'd say like around a 7, maybe a little bit more than a 7, but definitely less than an 8. Because I don't know, I'm like in it for the animation value almost purely. Anytime I sit down to watch like almost any Japanese movie, I'm already accepting that it might not make sense and it might not go anywhere because I've just seen it so many times. It's just how they tell stories a lot of the time, I guess. So I'm very used to like this kind of thing coming out, being like, I don't know what happened, but that was beautiful. So yeah, in terms of like comparing it to other Japanese films I've seen, it was visually wise one of the best I've ever seen. So
especially for a 1995 film.
Yeah, especially that.
I think maybe I'm just too white for this film. Just
yeah. Well, like I don't know, it's hard to compare to like Hollywood films, so it'll be interesting to see Hollywood's take on it next time. But
because I honestly enjoyed the 2017 one more, so as a film in itself.
As a film, yeah.
Considering that's like what, 20 years, almost 20 years later. That is legit 22 years later.
22.
Yeah, there's a lot more thought and detail you could have put into it, but it's also a Western interpretation of what the movie was about. And I guess you could really interpret it in any way you fucking want, so... But, of course, there would have been things like anime and everything else to come after this as well, so there's a lot more to dig through if you really want to get the story out of it.
Yeah. The 2017 one does actually, surprisingly, stick to this original we just watched, surprisingly a lot. Like, it's incredibly similar. Like, when... You know, as I watched like the old one compared to the new one, you can see scene by scene there are like copied and pasted.
Wow.
Are some of the shots the same?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, they copied similar shots. Well, I won't spoil any of it, but we can go over that when we watch the new one.
Yeah.
But there are some comparisons and the way they've done it, which we can discuss. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
It's good to hear because not many live action interpretations of any anime or game have ever been really considered successful by those who are fans of the original source material.
Sure, yeah.
So it's great to see that at least someone who's made a live action has managed to stick to the source material, which is literally what everybody wants anyway. I mean, when you deviate from that, you're just working up a slippery slope here, and you're just making things harder on yourself. And I think that's something we see all the time when they give it a shot. If they just stuck to what we originally love it for, then they'll actually be able to get away with it. I think the different medium between anime and live action has a few different techniques that can't necessarily be crossed over, but I still think there's a lot of other ways that it can still be done successfully, but I've just never seen it.
Honestly, I don't think live adaptions have to stick even that close to the original. I think it just has to replicate the atmosphere and like the way the characters come across.
Yeah.
I mean, they can put huge plot differences, but as long as like what makes the characters interesting and relatable in the original comes through in the remake, I think that makes a good remake.
I don't even think that plot is important when you're doing a remake. I think it's about, as you said, like capturing the feeling of it, figuring out like what it is that people love about it, and then like doing a good job of that.
I think a lot of it is very intertwined though, and I think they definitely underestimate how much of it goes together in order to make the same feeling that people get. I mean, Death Note's recently done their Netflix sort of interpretation of that anime, which I've only just started watching recently, but at the same time, as in whether you get the plot right or the world right or the characters right, I feel like if you don't get all of them at least relatively close to what you're going for, you're going to miss the mark on why people liked it in the first place.
Right, it's different for different series and different IPs, but
I suppose.
Yeah, like what makes a series popular and what do people like about it? It's like different for different series. Like sometimes it's characters, sometimes it's environment, sometimes just like feeling people get from it, which sometimes it's just incredibly hard to replicate in remakes because I think different people get different impressions for what makes something good.
I think we're also biased against remakes in general as well.
Oh, sure, because the track record's been pretty bad.
It is. I mean, whether they're doing soft reboots or they're doing straight up remakes or fucking sequels, they seem to always fall flat on their ass for just some reason. It's a different one every time. But it's as clear as day every time you go and see it that there is something clearly wrong with it, that you would rather just go and see the original.
Pretty much every remake that I've ever seen that I can think of off the top of my head, no matter who's made it, Hollywood or whatever,
falls under the bar of what the original managed to achieve.
Yeah.
And it's either because they deviated too far from the source material, or you could say perhaps they didn't deviate far enough. But again, it's a slippery slope, and it's going to be hard to please everybody when you're trying to compare it to something already that exists.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we all decided that we didn't like the movie as much as we thought.
I feel a little guilty that I rated it incredibly low.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't know. I think I've just grown up in this particular era when graphics and things are just not as dazzling as they probably used to be. I'm just too used to seeing amazing things that it just doesn't wow me anymore. Same with CGI effects and everything else.
Because it kind of disappointed me, honestly. It wasn't as good as I expected.
Yeah, same. I think the fans, I can definitely see why people love it, but I think the fans hype it up a lot, and I was expecting, a pure masterpiece. Visually, it was, but, character plot didn't really reach that.
I guess that basically sums it up then.
Yeah. Hopefully we didn't offend too many people.
Sorry
There's a lot of fans.
Goes to the shelf
Sorry,
fans.
can only be as honest as I can be.
Alright, thanks for listening to another episode of the Fat Potato Podcast.